In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills and whispering pines, life moved at its own gentle pace. The air always carried the faint scent of fresh earth after rain, and neighbors knew each other by name. It was here that Sarah Thompson lived with her father David, a man whose kindness seemed to light up even the darkest corners of their little community. David wasn't just a father. He was Sarah's hero, her guide, and her best friend all rolled into one. When Sarah was only 5 years old, her mother passed away unexpectedly, leaving behind an emptiness that no words could fill. But David stepped up in ways no one thought possible. He became both mother and father to Sarah, juggling work during the day while making sure she never felt alone at night. He cooked meals that weren't always perfect, but were made with love. He taught her how to ride a bike on the cracked pavement of their driveway, cheering louder than anyone when she finally pedaled without falling. And on cold winter nights, he would sit by her bedside reading stories until her eyelids grew heavy with sleep. Their bond was unshakable, built on years of shared laughter, tears, and countless memories. People in the town often remarked how lucky Sarah was to have such a devoted father. But what they didn't see were the sacrifices David made behind the scenes. The late nights spent working extra shifts so Sarah could attend summer camp, or the weekends he gave up fishing with his buddies because Sarah wanted to bake cookies together. For David, there was nothing more important than ensuring his daughter had a happy childhood, despite the loss they endured. As Sarah grew older, their relationship evolved but remained as strong as ever. She went from being the little girl who clung to his hand everywhere they went, to a confident young woman navigating adulthood. Even as she moved out to pursue her studies and later started working, Sarah made it a point to visit David every weekend. They would sit on the porch sipping hot chocolate, talking about everything under the sun, her job, his garden, the quirky habits of their neighbors. Those moments were sacred, carved out of busy schedules simply to be together. But life has a way of reminding us how fragile happiness can be. One chilly December evening, tragedy struck without warning. David was driving home from work when disaster unfolded. The roads, slick with ice from an earlier snowfall, proved treacherous for even the most cautious drivers. As David navigated a sharp curve near the edge of town, his tires lost traction. His car skidded off the road, crashing into a tree. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late. David was gone. News of the accident spread like wildfire through the tight-knit community. Neighbors gathered outside Sarah's house, offering hugs, casseroles, and condolences. Yet none of it could ease the crushing weight of grief pressing down on her chest. How could this happen? Just yesterday they had laughed over dinner, planning a holiday trip to visit relatives. Now the chair where David used to sit was empty, and the silence in the house felt deafening. Sarah struggled to process the reality of losing her father. Every room reminded her of him. The kitchen where he hummed old tunes while cooking, the living room where they watched movies together, the hallway lined with photos chronicling their lives. Each memory brought a fresh wave of pain, yet she clung to them fiercely, unwilling to let go. Without David, the world seemed darker, colder, and infinitely lonelier. Preparations for the funeral began almost immediately, though Sarah found it hard to focus. Friends and family helped organize the details, knowing she was in no state to handle them alone. Choosing songs, selecting readings, and picking out flowers felt surreal, as if she were planning someone else's goodbye rather than her own father's. Still, she poured herself into the process, determined to give David the farewell he deserved. On the morning of the funeral, Sarah stood in front of her mirror, staring at her reflection. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her face pale beneath layers of makeup meant to hide her exhaustion. She wore a simple black dress, the same one she'd worn to her mother's funeral years ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. Life had come full circle, forcing her to say goodbye to the two people who meant the most to her. The church where the service was held was filled with familiar faces. Friends, co-workers, and distant relatives packed the pews, united in mourning. Candles flickered softly along the walls, casting warm glows that contrasted sharply with the somber atmosphere. A large photograph of David stood at the front, capturing his signature smile, the one that could light up any room. As eulogies were delivered and hymns sung, Sarah sat quietly, clutching a worn photograph in her hands. It was a picture of her and David taken years ago, standing beside her first bicycle. She traced the edges of the photo with trembling fingers, trying to hold on to the last remnants of normalcy. Throughout the ceremony, Sarah fought back tears, steeling herself for the moment she dreaded most, saying her final goodbye. When it came time to approach the casket, she hesitated, her legs feeling like lead. Slowly, she rose from her seat and walked toward the polished wooden box that now held her father's body. Her heart pounded in her chest, each step heavier than the last. Finally, she reached the casket and knelt beside it, her breath catching in her throat. With trembling hands, she placed the photograph gently inside before leaning forward to hug the casket. "I love you, Dad," she whispered, her voice breaking. In that instant, something extraordinary happened. A warmth radiated through the wood, seeping into her arms and wrapping around her like an embrace. Startled, Sarah pulled back, her eyes wide with confusion. Was this real? Or was her mind playing tricks on her, desperate for one last connection with her father? The warmth lingered for a moment longer before fading away, leaving Sarah shaken but oddly comforted. Around her, others shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what, if anything, they had witnessed. But Sarah couldn't deny what she had felt. It was as if for a brief second her father had been there with her, holding her close one final time. As the service concluded and mourners filed out of the church, whispers began to circulate. Some claimed they saw movement near the casket during Sarah's embrace, while others dismissed it as shadows or reflections. Whatever the truth might be, one thing was certain. David's presence continued to leave an indelible mark on those who loved him, even in death. And for Sarah, the journey was far from over. The day of the funeral dawned gray and heavy, as if the sky itself was mourning alongside Sarah. The air was thick with a chill that seeped through her coat and into her bones, but it wasn't just the weather making her feel cold. It was the emptiness inside her, the void left by her father's absence. She had spent the previous night tossing and turning, unable to sleep, replaying memories of David in her mind. Every laugh they shared, every story he told, every moment of his unwavering support now felt like fragments of a dream slipping further away. Sarah woke early, long before the sun had risen, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the steaming cup of tea she hadn't touched. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to steady herself, knowing the hours ahead would be unbearable. Friends and neighbors had offered to help with preparations, but Sarah insisted on doing as much as she could herself. It was her way of staying connected to her father, of keeping him close, even though he was gone. She combed through old photo albums, selecting pictures for the memorial display, snapshots of family vacations, birthdays, holidays, and quiet moments captured over the years. Each image brought both comfort and pain, reminding her of how full her life had been with him in it. By mid-morning, the house was bustling with activity. Relatives arrived one by one, their faces etched with sympathy. Some brought food, others offered hugs, but none of their gestures could ease the ache in Sarah's chest. They spoke softly, tiptoeing around her grief, unsure of what to say. "He was such a good man," someone murmured. "You were so lucky to have him," another added. But Sarah didn't need reminders of how special David was. She already knew. What she needed was more time with him, more chances to hear his voice or feel his reassuring presence. Instead, all she had were memories, and soon those would belong to the past too. As the clock ticked closer to the start of the service, Sarah dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that felt respectful yet personal. She wore her mother's pearl earrings, a gift David had given her when she graduated high school. The weight of them against her ears made her feel grounded, as if part of her parents' love was still with her. When she glanced in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her cheeks pale, and her expression hollow. For a moment, she considered putting on more makeup to hide the signs of her sorrow, but then she stopped herself. Why pretend? Everyone who came today would know exactly how broken she felt. The drive to the church was silent, except for the soft hum of the car engine. Sarah sat stiffly in the passenger seat while her cousin drove, gripping the photograph of her and David tightly in her lap. Outside, the streets were eerily quiet, the town cloaked in a somber stillness. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the ceremony to begin. When they pulled up to the church, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The sight of the building filled her with dread. This was where people said their final goodbyes, where lives were celebrated and laid to rest. Today, it was David's turn. Inside, the church was warm and dimly lit, with rows of wooden pews stretching toward the altar. Candles flickered along, the walls casting golden light that danced across the stained glass windows. A large photograph of David stood at the front, propped on an easel draped with black fabric. In the picture, he was smiling brightly, his eyes crinkling at the corners, a look Sarah remembered well. Seeing his face there, frozen in time, made her throat tighten. She wanted to run forward and shake him awake, to tell him this wasn't real. But she couldn't. All she could do was stand and stare, memorizing every detail of the image as if committing it to memory might keep him alive somehow. Friends, family, and acquaintances filled the pews quickly, their whispers blending into a low murmur. Some dabbed at their eyes with tissues, while others exchanged stories about David, recalling his kindness, humor, and generosity. One elderly neighbor recounted how he once shoveled snow off her driveway without being asked, while another described how he always greeted everyone with a cheerful "good morning," no matter the weather. These anecdotes painted a vivid picture of the man Sarah adored, but hearing them only deepened her sadness. How could someone so beloved simply vanish? When the service began, Sarah found herself sitting in the front row, surrounded by relatives but feeling utterly alone. The pastor spoke first, delivering a heartfelt eulogy that highlighted David's devotion to his family and community. Then came readings from Scripture, chosen because they reflected David's faith and values. Hymns followed, their melodies swelling through the church and filling the space with bittersweet beauty. Sarah tried to focus on the words, to let them bring her some measure of peace, but her thoughts kept drifting back to her father. She imagined him sitting beside her, humming along to the songs or leaning over to whisper something funny in her ear. The ache of his absence grew sharper with each passing second. Finally, the moment arrived when mourners were invited to pay their respects at the casket. One by one, people filed past, pausing briefly to offer condolences or share a memory. Some placed flowers on the polished wood, while others simply bowed their heads in prayer. Sarah watched numbly as the line moved forward, dreading the moment it would be her turn. When everyone else had gone, she remained seated, frozen in place. Her heart pounded wildly, urging her to stay put, to avoid facing the reality of her loss. But she knew she couldn't run forever. Taking a shaky breath, she rose from her seat and approached the casket alone. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if gravity itself was conspiring against her. When she reached the casket, she hesitated, her gaze fixed on the smooth surface. Before her, inside, lay her father, her rock, her protector, her best friend. The thought of seeing him motionless, unresponsive, was almost too much to bear. But she forced herself to look, to take in the peaceful expression on his face. He looked like he was sleeping, untouched by the chaos of the world. Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks as she placed the worn photograph gently inside the casket, tucking it beside his folded hands. Then, unable to resist the urge any longer, she leaned forward and hugged the casket as tightly as she could. "I love you, Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I miss you so much." As her arms wrapped around the cool wood, something extraordinary happened. A warmth radiated through the casket, seeping into her skin and spreading through her body. It wasn't the icy chill she expected, but a comforting heat, like a gentle embrace. Startled, Sarah pulled back, her eyes wide with confusion. Was this real, or was her mind playing tricks on her, desperate for one last connection with her father? Around her, others shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what, if anything, they had witnessed. Whispers rippled through the crowd. growing louder as people debated whether they'd seen movement near the casket or felt a change in the air. Some dismissed it as imagination or coincidence, while others stared in awe, convinced they had witnessed something supernatural. But for Sarah, the experience was undeniable. It was as if her father had answered her call, reaching out across the divide between life and death to hold her one final time. Still reeling from the sensation, Sarah stepped away from the casket and returned to her seat, her mind racing. What did it mean? Was it truly her father trying to reassure her that he was still with her in some form? Or was it simply her grief manifesting in strange ways? She didn't have answers, but one thing was certain. The warmth she had felt lingered in her chest, a tiny spark of hope amidst the overwhelming darkness. As the service concluded and mourners began filing out of the church, Sarah clung to that spark, determined to carry it with her wherever she went. After the funeral, Sarah felt like she was walking through a fog. The warmth she had felt when hugging the casket lingered in her mind, refusing to fade away. It wasn't just a fleeting sensation, it had been real, tangible, and undeniable. But what did it mean? Was it truly her father reaching out to her, or was her grief playing tricks on her? She couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary had happened, something beyond explanation. Determined to find answers, she decided to return to the funeral home later that night. The drive back to the funeral home was quiet, the streets deserted under the pale glow of streetlights. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white from tension. Her heart raced with a mix of fear and curiosity. What if someone dismissed her concerns or thought she was imagining things? Still, she knew she couldn't ignore what she had experienced. She needed to understand, even if it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. When she arrived, the funeral director, Mr. Grayson, greeted her with a somber expression. He was an older man with kind eyes and a calm demeanor, someone who had spent decades helping families navigate the pain of loss. "Sarah," he said softly, "I wasn't expecting you tonight. Is everything all right?" Sarah hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Mr. Grayson, I need to ask you something about my dad." She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "When I hugged the casket at the funeral, I felt this warmth. It was so strange, so unexpected. Did anyone else notice anything unusual?" Mr. Grayson's brow furrowed as he listened intently. For a moment he didn't respond, his gaze drifting toward the floor as if searching for the right words. Finally he nodded slowly. "You're not the first person to mention it," he admitted. "After the service, when we retrieved the casket, one of our staff members commented on how warm your father's body still felt. We thought it might have been due to the embalming process or some other factor, but honestly, we were surprised too." Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Warm? But isn't that impossible? Bodies are supposed to cool down after death, right?" "Yes, they typically do," Mr. Grayson replied, his tone cautious yet sincere. "We double-checked everything, temperature, readings, procedures, equipment, but there was no logical explanation for it. Your father's body remained unusually warm for hours after the accident, even longer than we'd expect given the circumstances." His words sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She had suspected that something unexplainable had occurred, but hearing it confirmed by someone else made it all the more surreal. "Do you think it could be something else?" she asked hesitantly, unsure how to phrase her thoughts without sounding irrational. "Like maybe he's trying to tell me something?" Mr. Grayson sighed deeply, leaning against his desk. "I've been doing this job for over 30 years, and I've seen things that defy logic. People often talk about signs from loved ones who've passed, little coincidences, feelings, or events that seem too meaningful to dismiss. Whether it's science, faith, or something we can't fully comprehend, I believe there's more to life than what we see. If you felt that warmth, Sarah, I don't think it's something you should ignore." His response gave her a glimmer of hope, however small. Maybe the warmth wasn't just a random occurrence. It was a message, a way for her father to let her know he was still with her in some form. As she left the funeral home, her mind buzzed with questions. Could her father really be communicating with her? And if so, Why? Over the next few days, strange occurrences began unfolding around Sarah, each one leaving her more bewildered than the last. The first sign came early one morning when she stepped outside to fetch the newspaper. There, blooming defiantly in the frost-covered grass near her front steps, was a single daisy. Its petals shimmered with dew, standing out vividly against the dull brown earth. Sarah stared at it in amazement. Daisies weren't native to their area. They rarely grew wild here, and yet there it was, thriving despite the cold. Her father had always picked daisies for her when she was younger, especially during springtime. He used to say they reminded him of her, bright, resilient, and full of life. Seeing the flower now felt like a direct nod to those memories, a gentle reminder of his presence. Carefully, she plucked the daisy and brought it inside, placing it in a small vase on her kitchen table. As she gazed at it, she whispered, "Is this you, Dad? Are you trying to reach me?" The second sign arrived late one night, jolting her, awake. Her phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand, startling her out of a restless sleep. Heart pounding, she grabbed it and unlocked the screen, expecting to see a missed call or text from a friend. Instead, she found a single message waiting for her. "I'm still here." The text appeared plain and straightforward, but what made it unsettling was the absence of a sender. There was no name, no number, no indication of who or what had sent it. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at the screen. Was this some kind of prank? Or was it another sign from her father? She tried tracing the message, calling her service provider and checking her phone settings, but nothing revealed its origin. The text remained an enigma, hovering between reality and impossibility. Despite her skepticism, she couldn't deny the wave of comfort it brought. Those three simple words echoed in her mind long after she set the phone aside, whispering reassurance in moments of doubt. As the days passed, more inexplicable events began cropping up. Lights flickered unexpectedly during conversations about David, especially when Sarah recounted stories of their time together. One evening, while reminiscing with her best friend Emma, the living room lamp dimmed and then flared brightly, casting dramatic shadows across the walls. "Whoa, weird," Emma muttered, frowning at the bulb. "Must be a power surge or something." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She noticed patterns, subtle connections between these occurrences and her thoughts about her father. On another occasion, she was flipping through radio stations in her car when David's favorite song, a classic rock anthem he used to blast on road trips, suddenly played without her selecting it. She froze, her fingers hovering over the dial. "Dad," she murmured aloud, half expecting a response. None came, but the timing felt too perfect to dismiss as coincidence. Word of these strange happenings spread quickly among her friends and neighbors. Some dismissed them as products of grief or overactive imaginations, while others leaned into the mystery, speculating about divine intervention or spiritual messages. Even skeptics couldn't help but feel uneasy when odd phenomena occurred in their presence. One afternoon, Sarah hosted a small gathering of close friends to discuss the recent events. They sat around the dining table, sipping tea and sharing theories. "I don't know what to think," admitted Rachel, a childhood friend. "It's like, every time we talk about your dad, something happens, like he's listening." Emma chimed in, her voice tinged with awe. "Remember when the wind blew open the window yesterday, and that picture frame fell off the wall? That's never happened before." Sarah nodded, recalling the incident vividly. A framed photo of her and David had toppled onto the floor, cracking the glass slightly. At first, she panicked, thinking it was a bad omen. But upon closer inspection, she realized the crack formed a near-perfect circle around their smiling faces, framing them as if highlighting their bond. To her, it felt less like destruction and more like a message. Our connection is unbroken. Despite the mounting evidence, or perhaps because of it, Sarah struggled to reconcile her rational side with the growing sense of wonder surrounding her father's apparent presence. Part of her wanted to cling to logic, to attribute everything to coincidence or faulty wiring. Yet another part of her yearned to believe that David was still watching over her, finding ways to bridge the gap between worlds. To document these experiences, Sarah started keeping a journal. Each entry detailed the date, time, and nature of the event, along with her emotions and reactions. Writing became therapeutic, allowing her to process her grief while piecing together the puzzle of her father's mysterious messages. Sometimes she would read aloud from the journal during quiet evenings, imagining David sitting beside her, nodding approvingly. One particularly poignant entry described the night she heard faint footsteps echoing through the hallway. At first, she assumed it was her imagination, until she followed the sound to her father's old bedroom. The door creaked open slowly, revealing nothing out of the ordinary, just the familiar scent of his cologne lingering in the air. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Are you here, Dad? Please let me know." Though no visible answer came, the lingering fragrance provided enough reassurance to soothe her aching heart. These moments, however fleeting, kept her grounded, reminding her that love transcends physical boundaries. With each new sign, Sarah grew more certain of one thing. Her father wasn't truly gone. His spirit lived on, woven into the fabric of her everyday life, guiding her through the darkness with gentle reminders of his enduring presence. The signs from David continued to appear, each one more profound than the last. Sarah found herself living in a world where the ordinary rules of reality seemed to blur, replaced by an intricate web of coincidences and inexplicable events that she could no longer dismiss as mere imagination. Every day brought something new, a whisper on the wind, a flicker of light, or a memory triggered at just the right moment. It was as if her father was orchestrating these moments, weaving them into her life like threads in a tapestry meant to guide her forward. One evening, overwhelmed by the mounting mysteries, Sarah decided to visit the cemetery where her father was buried. She hadn't been there since the burial, unable to face the finality of seeing his name etched into stone. But now, driven by curiosity and longing, she felt drawn to the place where he rested. The air was crisp with the chill of autumn, leaves crunching beneath her feet as she walked along the narrow path lined with gravestones. Each marker told its own story, names, dates, epitaphs carved into granite, but none held the weight of meaning that hers did when she finally stood before her father's grave. David's headstone was simple but elegant, bearing his full name, and the years of his life, 1960-2023. Beneath it was a short inscription chosen by Sarah herself, "A loving father who gave everything." She knelt down, brushing away stray leaves and dirt from the base of the stone. Her fingers traced the engraved letters, feeling their sharp edges against her skin. For a long moment, she simply sat there, staring at the words, letting the silence envelop her. Then, summoning all her courage, she spoke aloud. "Dad," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to give me a sign. Something I can't ignore. Something only you would do." She paused, waiting for a response, though she wasn't sure what form it might take. Would the ground shake? Would the wind pick up? Or would there be nothing at all? As if answering her plea, the earth beneath her knees trembled faintly, a subtle vibration that sent shivers running up her spine. Startled, Sarah looked around, half expecting to see someone nearby causing the disturbance. But the cemetery was empty except for her. The sensation grew stronger, accompanied by a sudden gust of wind that swirled around her, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of David's cologne. It was the same fragrance he always wore, a blend of cedarwood and citrus that had become synonymous with his presence. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "Is that you?" Before she could process what was happening, another thought flashed through her mind, a phrase so clear it felt like someone had spoken directly into her consciousness. "Take care of Mommy's necklace." The words echoed in her head, repeating over and over until they drowned out everything else. Confused yet oddly comforted, Sarah rose to her feet and hurried back home, her heart racing with anticipation. Once inside, she rummaged through drawers and boxes, searching for the delicate locket her mother had worn every day until her passing. After nearly an hour of frantic digging, she finally found it tucked away in a velvet pouch at the bottom of a keepsake chest. The locket was small and silver, its surface tarnished with age but still beautiful. Inside was a faded photograph of her mother, smiling warmly, her arms wrapped protectively around a young Sarah. Flipping the locket over, Sarah noticed a tiny compartment she hadn't seen before, a hidden space concealed behind the photo. With trembling hands, she pried it open, revealing a folded piece of paper yellowed with time. Unfolding the note, Sarah recognized her father's handwriting immediately. His scrawl was messy but familiar, filled with loops and dashes that made her smile despite the gravity of the moment. The message was brief but cryptic. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Go to the bank. Box 724, trust me." Beneath the instructions was a series of numbers, what appeared to be a combination code. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. What could this mean? Was her father anticipating his death somehow? Or was this simply another layer of his meticulous planning, ensuring she'd have guidance even after he was gone? The next morning, Sarah drove to the local bank, clutching the locket tightly in her hand. Her nerves were frayed, her mind buzzing with questions. What awaited her in safety deposit box 724? Would it provide answers to the strange occurrences surrounding her father's passing? Or would it deepen the mystery further? When she arrived, the teller greeted her politely and escorted her to a private room where the boxes were kept. Using the combination from the note, she opened the metal door and peered inside. What she found took her breath away. Inside the box were several items carefully arranged: a stack of handwritten letters bound together with ribbon, a USB drive labeled "For Sarah," and a small wooden box containing photographs and trinkets from her childhood. Each object seemed to pulse with significance, as if imbued with David's love and intention. Sarah picked up the bundle of letters first, noticing that each envelope bore a date and a title, things like "When You Feel Lost" or "On Your Wedding Day." Curiosity getting the better of her, she opened the topmost letter and began to read. In it, David wrote about how proud he was of her, recounting specific moments from her life that showcased her strength and resilience. He offered advice tailored to challenges she might face, sharing wisdom gained from his own experiences. The tone was warm and encouraging, brimming with the same unwavering support he'd shown her throughout her life. By the time she reached the end of the letter, tears streamed freely down her face. It was as if he were sitting beside her, speaking directly to her heart. Next, she turned her attention to the USB drive. Back at home, she plugged it into her laptop, revealing a folder filled with video files. Clicking on the first one, she watched as her father's face appeared on the screen, smiling brightly. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice rich with emotion. "If you're watching this, then I guess I'm not around anymore. But don't worry, I'm okay. I just wanted to make sure you'd always have a piece of me with you, no matter what happens." Over the course of several videos, David shared heartfelt messages, told stories from his youth, and offered words of encouragement for different stages of Sarah's life. Some clips were lighthearted, capturing his playful side, while others were deeply emotional, filled with raw honesty and vulnerability. Watching the videos felt surreal, like stepping back in time to relive moments she thought were lost forever. Hearing her father's voice again brought a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. It was as if he were still here, guiding her through the pain of his absence. Each video ended with the same refrain: "Remember, I'm always with you, even if you can't see me. Keep going, sweetheart, you've got this." By the time Sarah finished exploring the contents of the safety deposit box, she felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The discovery confirmed what she had begun to suspect, that her father's presence wasn't confined to the physical world. Through the letters, videos, and even the signs he sent her, he had created a lifeline designed to keep their connection alive. No matter how far apart they seemed, he remained a constant source of love and reassurance. Word of Sarah's findings spread quickly among her friends and family. While some marveled at the lengths David had gone to ensure his daughter's well-being, others struggled to reconcile the supernatural elements of his legacy. Skeptics argued that coincidence and grief could explain much of what Sarah experienced, pointing to psychological phenomena like pareidolia, the tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random stimuli. Yet even the most hardened doubters couldn't deny the impact David's messages had on those who heard them. For Sarah, the revelation marked a turning point. She no longer feared the unknown or clung desperately to explanations rooted in logic. Instead, she embraced the mystery, finding solace in the idea that love transcends boundaries we may never fully understand. Whether through letters, videos, or unexplainable signs, her father's spirit continued to shape her journey, reminding her that even in death, bonds forged by love remain unbreakable. As days turned into weeks, Sarah carried the lessons she learned from her father into every aspect of her life. She started volunteering at a local community center, channeling her grief into acts of kindness inspired by David's selflessness. She reconnected with old friends, sharing stories and laughter that reminded her of happier times. And whenever doubt crept in, she revisited the treasures from the safety deposit box, drawing strength from the man who had taught her everything she knew about resilience and hope. Though David was physically gone, his influence lived on, not just in Sarah's memories, but in the lives of everyone he touched. His legacy became a testament to the power of unconditional love, proving that even when people leave this world, their impact endures. For Sarah, the journey was far from over. But with her father's guiding light shining brightly ahead, she faced the future with renewed purpose and an unshakable belief that miracles, big and small, are woven into the fabric of everyday life. The days following Sarah's discovery of the safety deposit box were a whirlwind of emotions. Each letter, each video, and every trinket from her father felt like a thread pulling her closer to understanding not just his intentions, but also the depth of his love for her. The revelation that David had planned so meticulously for her future, even preparing messages meant for moments he wouldn't live to see, left Sarah in awe. It wasn't just about the practicality of leaving behind guidance. It was about ensuring that she would never feel truly alone no matter how far apart they were. One evening, after spending hours watching the videos and reading through the letters, Sarah found herself sitting cross-legged on the floor of her living room, surrounded by the contents of the box. Her eyes drifted to the small wooden container filled with photographs and mementos. She hadn't explored it thoroughly yet, focusing instead on the more immediate treasures. Curiosity tugged at her and she reached for the box, lifting its lid carefully. Inside, she found an assortment of items: ticket stubs from concerts they'd attended together, pressed flowers from their garden, and even a tiny pebble David had once joked was magical during one of their hikes. But what caught her attention most was a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the other items. Unfolding it, she realized it was a handwritten list titled, "Things I Want You to Know." The simplicity of the title made her smile, but as she began to read, her heart swelled with emotion. Each line carried a nugget of wisdom or a memory wrapped in David's unmistakable voice. Life is messy, but don't let that stop you from finding joy. Always trust your gut. It knows things your brain hasn't figured out yet. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Strong people lean on others sometimes. Your laugh is contagious, never lose it. At the bottom of the page there was one final note. And always remember, Sarah, you are my greatest accomplishment. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the paper to her chest. These weren't just words. They were lifelines, reminders of who she was and who she could become. They echoed the conversations they'd shared over the years, the lessons he'd imparted without her realizing how deeply they'd take root. In that moment, Sarah understood something profound. Her father hadn't just prepared these messages for her sake. He'd done it because he trusted her to carry forward everything he stood for. Inspired by the clarity she felt, Sarah decided to honor her father's legacy in ways both big and small. She started by organizing a community event dedicated to his memory, inviting friends, neighbors, and co-workers to celebrate the man who had touched so many lives. Held in the town park where David often volunteered planting trees, the gathering became a tribute to his kindness and generosity. People brought stories, photos, and even recipes inspired by meals he used to cook. Someone played guitar while others sang along to his favorite songs. Laughter mingled with tears as everyone shared memories of David, painting a vivid picture of the impact he'd had on their lives. During the event, Sarah stood before the crowd, holding up the locket her mother had worn, the same one that had led her to the safety deposit box. Her voice wavered slightly as she spoke, but her words resonated deeply. "My dad taught me so much," she said, "but the most important thing he ever gave me was love. And now, I want to share that love with all of you." She encouraged everyone present to perform acts of kindness in David's name, creating ripples of positivity that would extend far beyond the confines of their small town. In the weeks that followed, Sarah threw herself into projects inspired by her father's values. She began volunteering at the local senior center, listening to elderly residents recount their stories and helping them write letters to loved ones. One woman, Margaret, reminded her so much of her own mother that Sarah couldn't help but feel a connection. Together, they worked on compiling Margaret's life experiences into a scrapbook, a project that brought both women immense joy. When Margaret thanked her with tears in her eyes, Sarah realized she was doing exactly what her father would have wanted, spreading light in places that needed it most. Meanwhile, the mysterious signs continued to appear, though they grew less frequent over time. A daisy bloomed unexpectedly in her backyard despite the frosty weather. The scent of David's cologne lingered briefly during quiet moments when she least expected it. Even the flickering lights returned occasionally, casting playful shadows across her walls. While some might have dismissed these occurrences as coincidences, Sarah embraced them as gentle reminders that her father's presence remained woven into the fabric of her daily life. One particularly poignant sign came on a rainy afternoon when Sarah visited the cemetery again. Standing before David's grave, she noticed something unusual, a cluster of wildflowers growing near the base of the headstone. Among them was another daisy, vibrant and resilient against the damp earth. As she knelt to examine it, she spotted a small object nestled among the petals, a keychain shaped like a bicycle. It was identical to the one her father had given her years ago, the one she thought she'd lost forever. Picking it up, she turned it over in her hands, marveling at its reappearance. There was no logical explanation for how it had ended up there, but Sarah didn't need one. To her, it was proof that David was still looking out for her, guiding her steps even when she doubted herself. Back home, Sarah placed the keychain alongside the other keepsakes in her growing collection of mementos. She began referring to them collectively as Dad's messages, a term that captured the essence of what they represented. Friends and family marveled at her ability to find comfort in such strange phenomena, but Sarah saw it differently. For her, these signs weren't just random events, they were pieces of a larger puzzle, each one reinforcing the idea that love transcends physical boundaries. Whether through tangible objects, whispered thoughts, or unexplained sensations, her father's presence persisted, shaping her journey in ways she couldn't have imagined. As winter gave way to spring, Sarah noticed subtle changes within herself. The weight of grief that had once threatened to consume her began to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and gratitude. She started journaling regularly, documenting not only the signs she encountered, but also the lessons she learned from them. Writing became a form of therapy, allowing her to process her emotions while preserving the magic of her father's ongoing influence. Some entries focused on specific incidents, like the time her car radio played his favorite song 3 times in a row, while others reflected on broader themes of resilience, faith, and connection. Through it all, Sarah remained acutely aware of how lucky she was to have had a father like David. Not everyone got the chance to say goodbye the way she had, nor did they receive the kind of enduring support he'd provided, even beyond death. His meticulous planning, his unwavering belief in her potential, and his boundless capacity for love served as constant reminders of what truly mattered in life. Though she missed him desperately, she knew she would never stop carrying his spirit with her wherever she went. By the time summer arrived, Sarah's transformation was undeniable. She radiated a quiet confidence, her eyes sparkling with determination. Gone was the woman who had once felt lost and adrift in the wake of tragedy. In her place stood someone grounded in purpose, fueled by memories and inspired by the knowledge that love doesn't vanish. It evolves. Every act of kindness she performed, Every story she shared and every tear she shed became part of a greater narrative, one of healing, hope, and eternal connection. And yet, Sarah knew this wasn't the end of her journey. Just as seasons change, so too did her relationship with her father. What had begun as a desperate search for answers had blossomed into something far richer, a testament to the power of unconditional love and the miracles hidden within everyday life. With each passing day, she grew more certain of one truth. Though David was gone, his presence would always remain, lighting her path like a beacon in the dark. As the months passed, Sarah's life began to take on a new rhythm, one marked not by grief but by growth. The signs from her father, though fewer now, still came in moments when she needed them most. Each one served as a gentle nudge, reminding her that love doesn't disappear. It transforms into something eternal and intangible. These reminders weren't just for her. They were also meant to inspire those around her. Slowly but surely, David's legacy of kindness and resilience spread throughout the town, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. One crisp autumn morning, Sarah woke early, drawn outside by the golden sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. The air smelled of fallen leaves and earth, and the world seemed alive with possibility. As she sipped her coffee on the porch, she noticed something fluttering near the mailbox, a single white feather caught in the breeze. It drifted lazily before landing at her feet. Smiling softly, she picked it up, running her fingers over its delicate edges. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered, tucking the feather safely into her journal. To anyone else, it might have been an ordinary object, but to Sarah, it was a symbol of hope and continuity. That same day, she received an email from a woman named Clara, someone who had attended the community event honoring David earlier that year. Clara wrote about how much the gathering had meant to her, and shared a story about how David had once helped her family during a difficult time years ago. "Your dad didn't just change your life. He changed ours too," Clara wrote. "His generosity gave us strength when we needed it most." Enclosed with the message was a photo of Clara's young daughter holding a bouquet of daisies, smiling brightly. The image brought tears to Sarah's eyes. It was proof that her father's impact extended far beyond what she could see or measure. Inspired by Clara's words, Sarah decided to expand the scope of her efforts. She founded a small nonprofit organization dedicated to carrying forward David's spirit of compassion and service. Named Dad's Light, the initiative focused on helping families facing unexpected hardships, whether financial struggles, medical emergencies, or personal challenges. Through fundraisers, volunteer work, and partnerships with local businesses, Sarah created a network of support that mirrored the kind of community her father had always envisioned. People from all walks of life joined the cause, united by a shared desire to make a difference. The launch of Dad's Light coincided with the anniversary of David's passing, a poignant moment that allowed Sarah to reflect on how far she'd come since that devastating day. Instead of mourning his absence, she chose to celebrate his life by hosting another gathering at the park. This time, however, it wasn't just about remembering David. It was about continuing his mission. Volunteers handed out care packages, filled with essentials like blankets, toiletries, and handwritten notes of encouragement. Local musicians performed songs chosen by attendees, creating a soundtrack of joy and unity. Children played tag under the trees while adults swapped stories and laughter filled the air. At the center of it all stood Sarah, wearing her mother's pearl earrings and clutching the locket that had started it all. When she addressed the crowd, her voice rang out clear and steady. "My dad taught me that love isn't something you keep, it's something you share," she said, her gaze sweeping across the sea of faces. He believed in this town, in its people, and in the power of coming together. Today I want to honor him by doing the same. Her words sparked applause followed by spontaneous hugs and expressions of gratitude from strangers turned friends. But perhaps the most profound moment came later that evening, when Sarah returned home exhausted yet fulfilled. Sitting alone, in her living room she replayed one of her father's videos, the final one he'd recorded. In it, David spoke directly to her, his tone warm and reassuring. "Sarah," he began, "if you're watching this, then I trust you've found the letters and everything else I left behind. But more importantly, I trust you. You are stronger than you think, braver than you feel, and loved more than you'll ever know. No matter where I am, I'm proud of you. Keep shining, sweetheart." As the screen went dark, Sarah sat quietly, letting the weight of his words sink in. For so long she had doubted her ability to navigate life without him. Yet here, she was standing tall, carrying his light into the world. She realized then that the journey hadn't been about finding closure. It had been about discovering the infinite ways love continues to exist, even after loss. In the weeks that followed, stories of Dad's light began appearing in local newspapers and online forums. Neighbors shared anecdotes about how the organization had touched their lives, from providing groceries to offering emotional support during tough times. One elderly man recounted how volunteers had repaired his roof after a storm, saving him thousands of dollars he couldn't afford. Another family described receiving rent assistance that allowed them to stay in their home until they got back on their feet. Each story added another layer to David's legacy, proving that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples of change. For Sarah, these accounts reinforced the belief that her father's presence remained active in the world, not as a ghostly figure but as a force of good channeled through others. She often thought about the warmth she had felt at the funeral, the mysterious signs and the treasures hidden in the safety deposit box. Together, they formed a tapestry of connection that transcended death itself. Whether it was divine intervention, spiritual energy, or simply the enduring power of memory, Sarah didn't need answers anymore. What mattered was the love that bound them, and the knowledge that it would never fade. On quieter days, when doubts crept in or nostalgia weighed heavily on her heart, Sarah revisited the mementos she had collected. The keychain, the feather, the photographs, the letters, all of them served as anchors, grounding her in the truth of her father's unwavering devotion. Sometimes she imagined him sitting beside her, nodding approvingly at her progress. Other times she pictured him cheering her on from afar, urging her to keep going even when the road felt uncertain. Either way, she knew he was there, in spirit if not in body. As winter approached, Sarah found herself reflecting on the cyclical nature of life. Just as seasons changed, so too did relationships evolve. Her bond with David hadn't ended with his passing. It had transformed into something deeper, richer, and more profound. Every act of kindness she performed, every tear she shed, and every smile she shared became part of a greater narrative, one of healing, hope, and eternal connection. And though she missed him fiercely, she took comfort in knowing that his influence would continue to shape generations to come. By the end of the year, Dad's Light had grown into a thriving movement, inspiring similar initiatives in neighboring towns. Sarah traveled occasionally to speak at events, sharing her story and encouraging others to embrace the transformative power of love and community. Her talks were heartfelt and genuine, resonating deeply with audiences who saw themselves in her journey. Many approached her afterward, thanking her for giving them permission to grieve openly while reminding them that loss doesn't have to mean the end of connection. Back home, the cemetery where David rested became less of a place of sorrow and more of a sanctuary. Sarah visited regularly, bringing fresh flowers and sitting quietly beside his headstone. During these visits, she talked to him as if he were still there, sharing updates about her life, asking for advice, and expressing gratitude for everything he had given her. Though she never expected a verbal response, she often felt a sense of peace wash over her, as if his presence lingered in the rustling leaves or the soft hum of the wind. One snowy December afternoon, as she placed a wreath of evergreen and berries atop his grave, Sarah paused to look around. The cemetery was blanketed in white, silent except for the occasional chirp of birds overhead. For a moment she closed her eyes, breathing in the cold, crisp air. When she opened them again, she noticed a single footprint in the snow near the base of the headstone, not hers but smaller, almost childlike. A smile spread across her face as she whispered, "I know you're here, Dad. Thank you." Walking back to her car, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months. The pain of losing her father would always be part of her story, but it no longer defined her. Instead, she carried it as a badge of honor, a testament to the depth of their bond and the lessons he had taught her. Love, she realized, wasn't confined to physical proximity or temporal limitations. It lived in memories, in actions, in the way people treated one another. And as long as she kept sharing that love with the world, David's spirit would continue to shine brightly, lighting paths for others just as he had lit hers. In the end, Sarah understood that miracles weren't always grand gestures or supernatural events. They were the quiet, everyday moments that reminded us we are never truly alone. Whether it was the warmth of a hug, the flicker of a candle, or the whisper of the wind, these signs pointed to a truth far greater than any explanation could capture. Love endures. And for Sarah, that was enough.